let's face it, we've all done it. As you looked at a privacy policy on your mobile device, you scrolled through it as fast as you could, you hit I agree, and then you jump to the app or whatever it is you were trying to get to in the first place. And Jonathan Zuck from the Association of Competitive Technology is here to talk about that process and how we can maybe simplify it, Jonathan, because we do want people to be aware of what information's out there on them.
I agree. Right? I mean, it's a perennial problem, I think, to some extent, that we're so anxious to get to the technology that we're downloading, this app we've heard about, you know, our friend has shared with us, et cetera, that we click I agree without really paying any attention to what we're agreeing to. And the issue that's most often discussed in that context is what of my data is being collected and how's it being used? Are you just using it in your app? Are you sharing with an advertiser so that you can serve up more relevant ads to me instead of generic ads? Or is it being used for more data analysis purposes? And so people want to know how their information is being used, but obviously these long texts, privacy policies aren't the way to get that.
Right,
people just aren't going to read them.
So
we joke about the one-eyed monster, right? That I'm looking at this thing with one eye while doing something else, right? And how do I catch your attention and communicate with you effectively in that environment?
Yeah, so bridging that gap, or at least closing that, because again, there is a need, I think we all have, and a desire, as you point out. I want to know what company X is doing with my data, but I want to get to it too. So, so how do we get a shorter form or some kind of reduced content that does still get the point across?
So that is, I would say that's the new trend, if you will, right? I mean, privacy policies had their genesis in room full of lawyers, right? I mean, you know, right now in America and many places around the world, you're held accountable legally for the promises you make. So if the degree to which you tell people what you're doing and when you're doing it and why you're doing it, et cetera, there is somebody, in our case it's the FTC, who's going to hold you to that. So the fact that that's the case means that the people making those promises were usually lawyers and doing them as an inexpansive and incomprehensible way as possible so they could cover themselves later when they were talking to another lawyer.
But there is that tension though, right? That you do have a legal obligation, but in the real world, it's not flying.
And that's right. So that the privacy policies were designed for lawyers to communicate with lawyers when all is said and done. Consumers weren't really a part of that. So how do I better communicate between the developer and the customer? And that's where there's this evolution toward what we call short form privacy policies. So that maybe I can just have some categories of information and I boil things down, like is it contact related information, is it biometric information, there's all these health apps now and things like that. What sort of information is being collected by the application, how is it being used by you, and then under what circumstances are you sharing it with others? And the degree to which we can more effectively communicate that with our customers, I think that's how we build trust going forward. So maybe we design a screen that's got a more iconic view of those things so that I can look at it in 5 minutes most, or 2 minutes, to try to really see, okay, is this an app that collects this type of information? Maybe I better drill into that and read a little bit more rather than having to find it in paragraphs of prose.
But the challenge, or one of them, I think, is, and not government, but in terms of regulation and regulator mindset, it's like, you know, more is better. And we're going to protect people entirely, and we're going to be comprehensive, and so there's probably in the development community or the app community, like, I don't want to wind up having to be called to Washington to explain a policy that we thought we were following, but we didn't dot every I, and we kind of got caught on one here.
Well, and you're going to need to do both. I mean, that's what it's really going to boil down to, is you're going to need to have a privacy policy that you do via privacychoice.org or some, you know, a privacy policy generator, or an attorney's going to have to draft one. You're going to need that to cover yourself, right, from a legal perspective. But how you communicate that with your users can be done in a much more simplified way, so that they might actually make effective use of that information in making choices about how their information is collected by you. Like, you know, you see a notice, can I use your location information, right? And sometimes it's obvious, right? If it's Uber,
it's a map,
you know, they need it, right, to find you, right? Other times you're like, why do you need my location information?
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with the working of the app. Right. So actually just communicating to your user that I'm collecting this because I can, as opposed to because it's required for the app to function, is something that's still of value. And so I think there's some work being done, and we're part of that work to come up with reusable code that developers might use to communicate more effectively with their end user in broad strokes what's being collected and how it's being used.
And if anybody has any questions about the organization, you said it was Act Online?
Yeah, www.actonline.org. And I don't know if you put up other URLs. I can give you one later, or something that people can use to see this privacy policy in action if you want, and I'll give that to you.
It'll be on the screen, you'll see it right now.
Exactly.
Jonathan, thank you for the time. We appreciate that.
My pleasure.